and like I mentioned, I'm Phil. Um, and I live in Everett, pretty much downtown, and I've always had indoor cats. Never really thought much about outdoor cats. I just, I'd see cats around the city, and I'm pretty much right in town. So you see a lot of cats, and I just always assumed that they must belong to somebody. And I figure, I keep my cats indoors. Some people let their cats outdoors, indoor, outdoors, and so I just kept seeing cats and kept thinking that they must belong to somebody until this guy showed up in early 2011. And he showed up and he was really skinny and just kind of hanging around and just kind of coming and going. And it wasn't until August actually when he showed up and it was raining out and he curled up underneath this bench underneath a tree in my yard that it kind of clicked like, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't have a home. And so at that point I did what a lot of people do, and that's to start feeding, put food out. And he was very skittish, didn't want, would not share the yard with me. And but I put some food out and he came right to it and started eating. And so then I did the next thing that a lot of people do, and that's to build him a home. So the home on the right there is his home, and I built him a little enclosed space so he could eat out of the rain as well.
The dining hall.
The dining hall, exactly. And he moved right in. And so this was my adventure into TNR and kind of learning about outdoor cats was through Oliver and all that he's taught me. So then came trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to get this guy neutered and trapped? And so that meant, for me, it was a lot of stress. I'm very feline codependent, so I'll put that up there out front. I don't want to do anything that's going to scare the cats or injure. And I didn't know how to trap, and my fear was I'm going to do something wrong and he's never going to come back, and then I'm going to feel guilty for the rest of my life and it's going to be awful. And so that was the story I made up. But I went to the co-op and rented a trap and tried to get online and figure out how to use it. It was hugely stressful, like just massively stressful. And a couple weeks and I didn't get them. I've just completely failed in that. And so then I thought, well, went back to the internet and did some more research and learned about building a drop trap. And a drop trap, we're going to talk about that more in a little bit, but that was effective. I was able to trap him with the drop trap. So I brought Oliver over to the vet and paid the big bucks to get him neutered, and all was well. I thought, okay, that's, he's happy now, and now I could go along and kind of figure out how to care for him, and all was well. So, but it didn't take long I look out the window and I see this. I see Oliver brought his family along, and so then then my stress level went up, like, oh my gosh, now I got to figure out how to trap all these cats, these kittens, and the one cat was so stressful, and I couldn't quite tell how many he had. They only came at night, and they're all black, and so trying to figure out how many exactly are there, and there's just a lot of questions and a lot of unknown. And it was in December 2011 is when the CCC offered its very first TNR class, just this one here. And so that's where I learned about the CCC and got involved and actually went to that first class and learned, what you're here to learn, how to do TNR. And also got a mentor in that process. The CCC offers mentors to help out, kind of a hand-holding kind of relationship along the way. And for me, that was tremendously helpful to be able to have somebody hold my hand through this process and kind of teach me and tell me how to do things. And so, and I'll tell you more about these guys as we go. But first, a little bit about the Community Cat Coalition and who we are. We were formed in 2011 when a bunch of basically independent rescues people and a few different groups came together and decided that by working together, we can make a bigger difference in the lives of the community cats. And so Vicki mentioned she was one of those people at the beginning that had the brilliant idea of working together. So now we're a partnership between 4 organizations in the area and dozens of independent rescuers. And independent rescuers are me, Vicki, and sounds like a bunch of you. It's just individuals that are out there making a difference in the lives of cats. And so the CCC is there to help make that more feasible and kind of an easier job for all of us in that, so that we can all help the cats more easily. We also have a collaborative relationship with Feral Cat Spay Neuter and NOAA as well, 2 of the low-cost spay neuter organizations around. We're a completely nonprofit organization. Everybody's volunteers, including the board with the CCC. And I think we're over 100 volunteers now. It's pretty awesome. I'll tell you more later about how different ways people volunteer and kind of help out with the CCC. But our mission is to basically promote spay and neuter, kind of educate people about that process, and educate about trap, neuter, return through classes like this. We also offer a bunch of other classes that I'll tell you about later, and supporting independent rescuers, and you'll learn more about that at the end as well. So this is going to be a very basic introduction to TNR. You're going to learn the basics here. There's other more in-depth places to learn. This is a kind of the handbook for TNR. It's basically the manual of how to do it. This is available online for free. You get the PDF version. It's Neighborhood Cats puts this out. The link to this is in your handout, at the back of your handout. So you can go in if you want the more in-depth kind of manual of how to do it. There's also a handout called TNR Basics, I think. That's on our website, the CCC website, that you can go to and read more there if you want. So, but today you'll get the basic kind of how it all works and how to go about it. And also I mentioned the mentors. So mentors are part of the process. That there's a lot of stuff as you go. You'll see that it's kind of, we're going to show you the basics, kind of like fishing. Like you can learn how to fish, but then every site's going to be a little bit different, and the weather and all these things are going to make things a little bit more challenging. And so that's where the mentor can come along and kind of help you kind of figure things out.
Some of that you'll find in that extra guide that he was talking about in the back of the book, of your handout on the TNR Basics. It's really more in-depth. Things like what if you trap pregnant cats? You've got a litter of kittens you're dealing with, or like you said, the weather, those kinds of things. So it's really worth looking at and seeing if that will help you as well after this class.
Yep. So just some of the language that you're going to hear in this presentation. For the sake of this class, we're going to, feral cat, a semi-feral, a stray, a free-roaming cat. We're not going to really differentiate those things. Basically, it's a cat that's outside, and so it may or not have a home, but it's out there. So we're going to just talk about trapping. Ear tip is what happens. So when the cat has gone to the clinic and it's been altered already from that, then they cut off a tip part of the ear, and you can see the picture there. This cat's left ear, the tip is cut off. And so that's just an indication that the cat's already been altered. So which is a handy thing if you're managing a colony of feral cats, and that way you can look out from a distance and see which ones have already been altered and which ones have not. So, and this feral cat, say more about the ears.
Well, on the ear tip, it's just a 1/4 of an inch, but you can tell it's a surgical cut, so it doesn't really look like an injury type when you're used to seeing it. And one of the reasons you do it is when you're trapping a colony, often all those cats will look alike because they're basically, siblings. And so maybe you have 15 black cats. So this is a way of knowing which ones you've done. Or maybe you've moved to another state and someone else comes along and starts feeding this colony of cats. Then they can tell that they've already been done, because otherwise they get trapped, taken to the clinic, anesthetized again, shaved, ready for surgery, and someone may notice an incision on there. So they don't have to go through any of that. We see it in the trap. We determine, yes, that is a surgical ear tip. We let them go right then. So it's really worthwhile. Interesting to note is that here, at least at Feral Cats, Spay and Neuter Project in Linwood, they do the left side of the ear if it's a male, right side if it's a female. A lot of places all do the left side. Back east, stuff like that, different clinics. But I prefer knowing if it's a male or a female. It's just my preference.
And the ear tip doesn't hurt the cat. Like that was my feline codependency came up and didn't want to do anything that was going to hurt the cat, but it actually doesn't. So the cat, they do that when they're anesthetized, and it doesn't. So colony, for the sake of this class, is basically a grouping of cats that may or may not be related. And SNN is just abbreviation for spay neuter. So you'll see that. This is the basic order of operations that we're going to be going through, and we're going to go through these in more depth as with each one. So this is just the big picture of how this whole deal works. So when you're starting off, you're going to have a site, and it may just be your backyard. Like for me, it was my backyard. That's where I started and figuring out, okay. And so thinking about, you got to gather information, really. So how many cats? That's kind of the basic first question. And for me, that was a challenge because the black cats are roaming around at night. It's really hard to tell. So what I suggest is that you often estimate more. There's probably guess more cats than what you think there are. That way you have enough traps. Basically, what you don't want is to not have enough traps, get out there and realize, oops, there's more cats than what you thought. And so you want to estimate high on that. So trail camera, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. It's a great little piece of technology that can help information gathering, kind of figuring out how many cats. You'll learn more about that. You want to find out if there's a caretaker for the colony already. If some sites already have people that come by and feed, and you may see bowls out there. And if you do see bowls, you can leave a note down just saying, hey, I want to help with the cats, call me or whatever, and then the person will give you a call. But look, if there is somebody managing the cats, you want to connect with them, because they're going to have information about how many cats, what time they come around to feed, and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be really helpful in the planning process. And also how feral they are is another part you can kind of start to get a sense for as you're checking out the site, because some cats may be abandoned cats or lost cats that could potentially be either reunited with their owners if they're microchipped, or maybe they're lost and they could be, when you trap the cat and you kind of get a sense that it's more friendly, then maybe you can put up signs and posters and put things around and again reunite somebody's cat. So that's all information that's helpful to have near the beginning. You also want to assess the site to get a sense for how, where the good places to set traps. Every site's going to be different, and this is where sometimes having a mentor kind of can be helpful to get a sense for this. What challenges exist? Sometimes if it's a public place and it's lots of people coming by and it's not a good place to leave a trap for a long time, or maybe a place that you need to lock a trap to a tree or something to keep it with a bicycle lock so it's not going to walk away. Apartment management sometimes can be helpful, sometimes they can be unhelpful. And so there's a lot of this, there's a tact kind of approach to it when you're working with Murphy's Law, well, that too. But when you're working with apartment managers, generally the suggestion is you may want to just start with the person, whoever's feeding the cats, whoever you found out about the cats for, kind of get a sense from them what the climate is for management. Some management of apartments really want to be helpful and help the cats, but a lot of them don't, just want the cats to go away. So sometimes it's kind of working discreetly, kind of underneath the radar and taking care of the cats in that way. So that's where connecting in with whoever the contacts are at the apartment places and get a sense before you just go up to management. And sometimes that's true with a office, kind of commercial area as well. Sometimes you got to know when to ask and when not to ask. And
what will happen is you go right in there to the manager and they say, no, we don't want you on the property, period. And now you have no chance. So if you go from the other direction of ask questions later, help the cats first, and really, like Phil says, get to know who's feeding them, because you'll get all the information you need from that. It's really important. It's also important to train people as you go not to feed out in the open in apartments, not to feed on their porches, because they move out, the next people move in, they report all the cats. So we run into a lot of trouble in apartment complexes with cats for that reason.
Yeah. So another thing to consider when you're looking at a site is your own safety. Just considering, is this a safe place to be? A lot of the trapping happens at night or kind of dusk. And so just to be looking at, is this a safe place you want to be hanging out? Do you need to have somebody else with you in that space? So door-to-door information gathering is really helpful for a bigger site. And I'm going to be telling you about a big project that I helped out on in South Everett. There was 3 of us, and it took us about a month to do. And it was about 30 some odd homes in a pretty good sized chunk of area. So we spent the first day just going door to door, just knocking on doors and saying, hey, introducing ourselves that we're here going to be doing this, and educating about TNR, how it works, and asking for information about either their cats or community cats that they know of, and just all that information, finding out how many, where they feed, where they see them, where they don't see them, all that kind of stuff. It's helpful to have when you're thinking about where to place traps or where not to. And so, but also if they have indoor cats, then it's an opportunity to tell them, or if they have indoor-outdoor cats, they could say, we're going to be trapping on these dates, so please, if your cats have already been fixed, keep them inside that day, or they can show us pictures or ask them to put a collar on the cat or something, so somehow it indicates that we know it's already, this one's already done, basically, and we don't need to spend our time with it. Sometimes they may have indoor cats that are not spayed and neutered, and then we can offer them, connect them up with getting their cats spayed and neutered in that as well. So it's a lot of education in this process of going around. And I made a handout that I use going door to door that gives basic information about TNR. So on the back side is this great diagram from PetSmart Charities that just kind of explains TNR, how it works, and the whole bit. But then on the front side is just information about the CCC and kind of what the project is that's going on in their neighborhood, when we're going to be there to trap, my contact information, if there's somebody else, who they can call for questions or whatever. And so this kind of thing that can be really helpful to give them this information just so they have it to remember it, or if they're not there, nobody answers the door, you can leave it there, that kind of thing. It's one of those things that you want it to look official, like you kind of know what you're doing, but not too official. And so if it looks too official, then it's going to be scary to people in terms of thinking they're animal control and you're coming to do something. And so just to be mindful of kind of, again, how you present to people. And that's a really big piece of this when you're working with the community, is really kind of finding that happy medium space where you're not telling them what to do, but they're also assertive at the same time. So this is that big project I was just telling you about. We went door to door, walking around, gathering information. People love to rat on their neighbors. So they'll always be like, oh, it's the house down there. They're the ones with all the cats, whatever. And so this was one of those where neighbors pointed to them. And walking up here, you can just start to see various indicators that start giving you a sense of like, yeah, there's cats that live here. There's bowls around. There's lots of little hidey spots or whatever that cats are going to be around. And you can actually see there's 3 cats in that picture. I don't know if you can make them out, but just you start picking up on those little cues that tell you that, yeah, this is a place with a lot of cats. And it didn't help too that when I went further to their door, I looked down and saw this, mom and their kittens, and so all these empty bowls. So these people were incredibly grateful to have our help. They had been reached out to several different organizations saying, we have all these cats, like we need help with spay neuter, and a lot of organizations, they don't have the resources or the time, and so they just weren't able to help them. So we just happened to show up at the right time, and they were incredibly grateful and super helpful and supportive in helping us out and running the traps and the whole bit. So we got to educate them on how all this works, and that was an amazing thing. Sometimes you go door to door and you find the opposite, people that are very not wanting to help at all and very get off my property and all this kind of thing. And so we were fortunate in this to have the friendlier folks. So making a plan is really key to your own well-being in this process. And I would highly encourage you to always have a plan, not just get reactive and find cats. Oh, I got to go out and trap them, and then I got to figure out where they're going to keep them and when to find them when there's appointments or whatever. Like if you're reacting, you're going to be in your own level of chaos the whole time. It's kind of like the herding cats kind of thing. So always have a plan. Figure out in advance. Take a look at the site. Figure out how urgent is this? What other things to consider? Is the weather going to be turning horrible? Is there pregnant cats or injured cats or things like that might increase the timetable? Obviously, when your schedule is available to do it, and then checking on the spay neuter clinic to find out what their schedule is. Sometimes there's appointments available right away. Sometimes there's 3 weeks out. I don't know what it is now. Do you have a sense of what the clinic is now?
They're usually open 4 days a week, but if I'm new, I would be looking at the ones that have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or have several in a row. So if the first day you don't catch them all, you can take those in and then take the next and take the next, so you can work each day to get them. It'd be bad to start on the end of that and have only 1 day and then there's a week until the next one. So you don't want to trap during that time because you don't want to keep the cats in traps just waiting. So there are things we do to catch them quicker and things like that, but you definitely need to know when the appointments are as you're making your plan.
Yeah, you don't want to trap cats and then go look and see where the appointments
Right.
are. That's gonna not a good idea. So then other details to figure out where the cats are going to be held before surgery, and just lining up all the details, things that we'll be talking more here about. And that's really and part of this is, like for me, I mentioned I was really stressed when I was trapping Oliver, and it was a lot of stress and all this, and I had all his imagined stress related to trapping his kittens. And it was amazing when I actually did all this and followed this, it all worked. Like it was amazing to me how it all just kind of one thing after another just got in line, and it was all a real smooth process. So if you have a plan, that's really a big secret to success.
That was beginner's luck.
Beginner's luck? Oh, well, maybe. So one of the earliest things in the process is get your traps. And so you'll figure out how many cats you have. I always say get some extras. It's not going to hurt to have an extra trap or two. CCC has traps that you can borrow for free at no cost. And they're available as well as a member of the CCC, which officially you are since you've taken this class now. But for people that have not taken this class in the community, they can also borrow traps. And I think there's a $75 deposit for each trap that we just hold on to their check and give it back to them when they return the traps. So, but you'll need to borrow traps, and that sometimes takes time as well. Like that's another thing when you're scheduling is sometimes there's lots of traps available, and sometimes somebody else has got them, and so you may need to wait a little bit to get traps. And so when you're making your plan, that's part of the mix, is figuring out when are the traps available. So you want to make sure you have enough, and you also want to reassess the site, because again, the planning piece may take weeks, may end up taking several weeks to get all this ducks in a row before you actually get out there and start setting traps. So you want to make sure nothing has changed at the site. So when you do show up there again, before just take one last thing to make sure the Everything is still as it was, and no. It's amazing how I've gone to a site kind of planning or whatever, and you show up the day of trapping, and that's when the big construction project is going on right next door, or they're doing utility work right there or something like that. And it's like, oh my gosh. So that kind of stuff happens, and that's where you got to be flexible in your plan and figure out, okay, now what? Other things to look at again is, will the traps be stolen or vandalized? That's, you don't want to, if they're at a really public place, if you're trapping around this library, for example, you probably either want to not leave them out at all and just do it, come in and do it, no acclimation, just come and trap, or lock it to something or something like that. So, did I miss anything on that?
No,
Okay.
I think you got it.
Okay. So some of this I mentioned, when you're making your appointments, do it early. Feral Cat Spay Neuters in Linwood, they have an amazing website that has a ton of information on it, and you can actually look at their clinic calendar and see when the clinics are. You can schedule on there. And when you schedule the appointments, you can get the paperwork that you'll need for the cats right on there at the same time, which is really handy. And they're amazing. They're amazing at what they do and how they do it. Noah up in Stanwood also does, they have a spay neuter clinic that's free for feral cats as well. So they're further north for those that are up that way.
One thing I wanted to mention is that the Feral Cat Spay Neuter Project this past year went over their 100,000th cat spayed and neutered. Mm-hmm. Imagine that many cats.
It's an amazing operation. It's to see how they do what they do. It's all, it's a high volume spay neuter, and that's all they do. It's very impressive to go in there and take a look around and see them doing their thing. So acclimation, this is really the secret to success in trapping, is in the acclimation. And basically what this is, so you've assessed the site, you figured out where you're going to put traps. Well, now you come before you're going to start trapping and basically put up traps, but you don't set them. You just open them up and start feeding the cats in the traps. So then the cats get used to coming around, going into the traps, getting food, nothing bad happens. And they do this for several days. So ideally you're acclimating for 2 to 4, 7 days. The more you acclimate, the more success you're going to have. Because the cats, again, they're used to routine. They go in there, nothing bad happens, all is well. And so that's how you get, that's the secret to success, is the more you acclimate, the more they're going to go in.
Bungee it.
So bunging it is so you don't just set the trap, you got to make sure the door is not going to close. So we usually use a bungee cord, super tight on there. Some people use zip ties. What you want to do is set the trap out, bungee it open, and then you want to wiggle the door to make sure it's super secure. Because what you don't want is a loose door where the bungee is really loose, and because inevitably a cat will go in there, and then a kitten will come along, or somebody will start playing with the bungee cord, and then the door will close, and suddenly you've trapped a cat that you weren't expecting to trap. So you want to make sure that it's super tight. I always check them each time. You go back and restock the food, make sure the bungee's still tight, make sure it's all as it was. Because you don't want to end up trapping cats before your appointments in the whole bit, if you can help it. Because otherwise, then suddenly you're having to kind of figure out how to make it all happen. So stick to your plan.
So if you're acclimating them, be sure to go and check that trap every day just to be on the safe side. You don't want a cat sitting in there for a day.
Yeah. Yeah. You also want to make sure the door can't close. I mentioned that. Mm-hmm. Acclimation, sometimes if it's a real public place, you may not be able to acclimate. If it's along a really busy road or a busy sidewalk or something like that, like maybe one of those situations where you're just not able to do that. So then you get to kind of wing it. But the other one is holding food. So some people do this, some people don't, is that if you hold the food in advance, so you're acclimating in that time, and then between acclimation and when you're actually going to start trapping the cats, if you hold the food back at that point, so that way they're used to coming in the traps, but there's no food, that way they're guaranteed to be there come the day you actually want to trap them.
And then also the day that or the week that you're acclimating them, you can manipulate what time they're eating. So if you're going to be able to trap in the morning or the evening, that's when you would feed them, and feed them in the same exact spot. Even if you don't have a trap, put the food down at the same time. That makes them start coming and looking for it at that time. That way when you start trapping, that's when they'll be there, show up for the food.
So this is a picture of a trap. This is in Marysville. One of the things you'll see is when you're placing traps, you want to kind of hide them. Basically, you got to think how a cat's going to operate and be, and so a cat will be down at that level and will be able to easily find that trap. But you want to kind of keep them hidden because this is actually a pretty busy road in Marysville, and what you don't want is people walking by and seeing them and kind of messing with them. And so in this case, it's hidden away between the house and the trees and the trash cans, and doors bungeed open, and it's cats are getting used to going in there. And this was my acclimation of Oliver's family in my yard. There's 2 traps in the field that you can see, and there's one underneath the big planter thing. And traps are covered. It was amazing to me how this worked. I was just after all that stress dealing with Oliver and getting him trapped, actually following this process, and it was like magic how it all worked. I think I was in contact with Nancy a fair amount, my mentor in that process, and she assured me it's all going to go well. It does. It goes well. There's a couple of sites I'm going to show you just from kind of going around to give you a sense when you're looking at sites what to be thinking about. So this is a site that has lots of stuff around, which is really great for outdoor cats because there's lots of places they can hide and get away from predators. And so when you're thinking about setting traps, you think about, again, how a cat is going to think. And so you don't necessarily going to put it out in the middle of an open space, but around some of the stuff. So around the van, underneath the van, just around and some of the stuff, so that it's going to be where the cats kind of hang out naturally anyway. This is a site in Linwood that Vicki introduced me to, actually, and it's a real industrial area. Somebody had been feeding behind that tree, between the tree and the fence, and this is your favorite site?
I don't know that it is my favorite site. It's the bane of my existence site. First I was trying to find the kittens there because someone had told me out by that road they'd seen some. I just kept driving through there, and finally I saw some bowls down by the tree. And so then I started actually sitting there and waiting, and finally saw these cats. But down to that side is a cul-de-sac, and down at the bottom, it's 3 businesses together. They have wire, they have razor wire, they've got lock gates. I'm not allowed on the property for liability. Recycling center, it's near the dump. So it's a really tough place to trap. Plus, it's like on a green belt thoroughway. And so it seems like there's always a cat that shows up that I've never seen before. And so then that one has to be trapped, I can get all but 1 cat in a year, right? And that last cat will have a litter of kittens because another cat has shown up. It's the site that won't stop. So it's a frustrating site. But it's also a pretty safe spot for the cats. And they have good feeders there. In other words, people that come and feed them like twice a day. So they're really well taken care of. But that's one of those places that even when I took Phil there to show him some stuff, we set a trap and somebody started painting the fence or something like that.
Yeah, power washing the fence that day when we went to trap.
I mean, I wish I had a book for every time somebody does something ridiculous, like comes out and starts their motor in one of those barrels of water, just when you're going to trap, or some kids on a motorcycle up and down the street, just a million things. Golf clubs, let's practice, it's just everything. And it ruins it for your whole day usually, because the cats aren't going to come around. They like their pattern, and they stick to a pattern. But anyway, that site, if anybody wants to help me on that, it's never ending.
This is a house in Everett, and you can see that. Who can see the trap? Can you see the trap? If you look hard enough. Like again, this is one of those areas where you want. If you're walking by, you're not going to really notice it. And it's one of the traps that we use are these nice brown colors that kind of blends right in, which is nice. But it's next to the door. Let me point to it. So that's the trap right there. So it's against the wall of the carport. So the cat, and that's where the cats walk. It's this, that little space there. So it's basically they're gonna bump into it even if they don't want to. This is a house in busy area of Marysville again, and lots of places for the traps to go between the trees and the house. And so again, it's really ideal for that because people walking by on the road are not going to see them, but the cats certainly will. And so that was a very ideal place to be setting traps. When you're out looking around like that, especially in a place like that with a yard, you'll see kitty trails. Cats always take the same pathway through a yard or whatever, and a little trail will be there in the weeds and in the grass. That's a great way to see kind of where the cats are moving and how they go about. And you may see, trails go off into the bushes or whatever. Like just all that can be really valuable information when you're planning and thinking about where to place traps or where the cats are going, that kind of thing. In this case, these are our last 2 cats on this site, and the cats were kind of used to eating. The food bowls were kind of down over here, and the cats have been hanging out in here. And so in this case, it was easy to put the traps out, so the cats basically had to walk by them on the way to their normal feeding site. This just shows you how the traps just blend right in. Again, that it's I really like using those brown traps for that reason, that they just kind of blend in, so that the random person walking by is not going to mess with it. This is that site again in South Everett with there was kind of a little ongoing site for, when we stopped to do information gathering, we weren't preparing to take any cats home, so we didn't have necessarily the equipment. But in this case, like you saw the kittens on the porch, these young kittens are ready to be taken out and find homes and kind of get spayed, neutered. And so we started gathering kittens. There was actually there's a little spot back here where there's a bunch of, I don't know how many, there was like a dozen kittens in there. So somebody started grabbing them out and just putting them in the carrier. And so this carrier has a bunch of kittens in it. And one way, when you have kittens and you're trying to get mom, is in a sense using the kittens as bait. So the kittens are in here, set the trap in front, and so that way mom wants to get to the kittens, and the only way to do that is to go through the trap. And so then you have mom as well as the kittens. In this case, sadly, our traps, we had a smaller kind of kitten-sized trap. Again, we weren't really prepared to be trapping, but we got her. So then we got mom and that patch of kittens. This guy is crafty. So we're out baiting traps, and he circled back to eat the bait food as we're out baiting traps. He's already ear-tipped, you can see. So he's been to the rodeo before. He knows what he's doing. Smart kitty. So these are the trail cameras that I mentioned. And so when you're gathering information, these are super, super handy. It's basically, I think they're used for hunting, but it's got the infrared, so it can take pictures day or night, detects motion, and basically takes pictures when there's motion detected. And so it's super, super handy for gathering information. So in this case, how many kittens, what time do they come around, what they look like, because that way we've got the black one and the gray one, or maybe it's a possum that's eating the food. Maybe it's not even the cats that are eating the food. Maybe it's it's less cats than you think, because there's other animals that come around. This is that big site again that I keep mentioning, and when we're going around gathering information, there was kids in the neighborhood that pointed to this area, like, oh, there's kittens over here. And kids can be a great source of information in terms of figuring out. Kids know everything about what's going on in an area, so they pointed over here. And they're not the most accurate information. They said there's kittens. Some would say 3, some would say 4, but we just knew there was kittens underneath this pile of vinyl siding. So we start peeling back the siding to see how many kittens. And if you can see, there's a little one there. And so Sue was able to just start grabbing some of the kittens and putting them in the carrier, which was super handy. But then the question is, how do you know if you got all the kittens? Like, we don't know, and you don't want to leave any out there. And so that's where the camera comes in. And so there would happen to be an old radiator sitting there, so that was handy. Strapped the camera to the radiator, pointing at the nest where the kittens were. The other question we had is, did we get mom already? Because this is a month-long project, so we're trapping cats and releasing them again. And some, we'd already gotten lots of moms, but did we get the mom of these kittens? And so we set the camera overnight and then came back the next day and saw this. And so there was one kitten left, and mom, you can see, is already ear-tipped. And so we knew we got mom. So now it was a matter of just getting that last kitten. So the cameras, actually the CCC has a bunch of those cameras that are available for loan as well at no cost. They're super helpful. It's hard to imagine now I'm not using them in this, because they're just so helpful. So here are some of the traps that, we mentioned the True Catch is the brown traps that we use, the CCC has available. There's also have a heart traps and tomahawk traps that are also out there that you'll see. The True Catch, and we're gonna do a demonstration at the end that you'll be able to actually see how the traps work and stuff, but just a bit about them. The True Catch, they close by gravity. So the door, there's no spring-loaded anything to it. So these little 2 rings that are kind of used to keep the door closed, but there's no gravity. So when it closes, it's much quieter of a close, and it's much less possibility of injuring the cat with any kind of spring action. These other ones have springs in them, so that when it closes with a lot more force. And so if there's a second cat coming in following the first cat, then it could potentially injure that cat or clip the tail or something. So the true catch in that way are nice. But also the quieter factor is nice, so that if the loud one closes and there's a bunch of, you're doing a lot of different cats, and the other ones may scatter because it's kind of a scary sound. And it's not uncommon that if there's a cat in the true catch, it'll close and the cat will probably just kind of move and then keep eating. They don't get nearly as scared in those, which is nice. And then there's the drop trap. So the one I built you saw was wood and had kind of a marine netting. There's also these that have PVC pipe and that are filled with sand for weight, and then a mesh, kind of garden mesh netting that's used. And those are nice because they're really collapsible. You can just kind of basically make it flat and easily transport it around. And it's with all plastic, it's easier to sanitize as well. And I'll show you a little bit more about drop trap here in a minute. And then a divider fork is the tool that's used for accessing a trap or a cat in a trap. If there's a cat in there, basically you slide the fork through the side in the trap, and then you can access the other part of the trap. So if you're going to put food into the trap that has a cat in it, or you're changing the bedding or something like that, then you always use the divider fork, and we'll again show you that at the end. But key thing is always go through the side, make sure it's poking out fully on the other side. Don't go through the top. And that's seems like every trapper has made that mistake once, because if you go through the top, the cat runs against it, it'll pivot out of the way, and the cat will just dart out, and then you've lost your cat. I always suggest that whenever especially when you're starting out, if you're doing anything to, kind of changing the the bedding or the food in the trap, always do it in a closed room. So if you're doing it in your garage or whatever, make sure the garage door is closed. Or if you're doing it in a shed or whatever, always keep that door closed, because you never know when something crazy is going to happen. Some big sound will happen or something, and suddenly the cat will get spooked, and somehow will end up it's out, and now it's at least out in your garage rather than out in your neighborhood. So, and that's a lot of things. That's one thing that I learned the hard way as well. So the drop trap is a great tool for selectively trapping cats. There may be a colony of cats that you have out there and that have already been spayed and neutered, but a new one comes along and that you need to get, but you don't want to get the existing ones because they've already been done. And so, like in this case, in the picture, there's already one under there. So if I was trying to get the one that's under the trap, then it's ideal. So it's also a really handy tool for injured cats. There may be some cats that are injured, their legs being held funny or whatever, they can't bend it, and so they can't fit easily into a regular trap. Or some cats are they've already been trapped once and they're not going to go down that road again, and so they're just not going to go near it, something like that. So a drop trap is a great idea for that as well. But basically, it's pretty old school. It's basically just a box with a net kind of around it, with a stick that's used to prop it up, and then a string. And you sit on the other side of the string some distance away, waiting for the cat that you want to go into there, and then you pull the string. So it's pretty old school. The few things to consider about drop traps is if you do have a lot of cats that you're not trying to trap and you're waiting for the one, you may need a lot of bait out there because you're waiting. Basically, so that maybe 5, 6 cats may come along and eat the bait food and keep eating, and you don't want to run out of bait, so that when the cat comes, you want to actually trap. Make sure there's enough food there. So, did I miss anything?
One of the reasons that you would use a drop trap also is because cats have a tendency to go under something a lot easier than into something. They'd have a tendency to feel like they're just going under something they would normally, like a boat or something leaning up against something. So the drop trap really makes a difference if you've got an injured cat, like with a broken leg, because I can't tell you how many times, hopefully you don't run into it very often, but I personally have tried trapping a cat in a regular trap that had a broken leg and he wouldn't go into it. So we didn't used to use these, they weren't around, and so these make a big difference.
You can also acclimate with these traps as well. And so, basically leaving it open. I would use like a recycling bin or something to, put underneath it. So you want to make sure it's no way it's going to close, and just start feeding under it. And that's an easy way to get them acclimated to going under there, because some cats are super skittish and they're not going to do anything like that. They'll go near it. But if you start feeding under there for a few days, they'll get used to it and will go under. I actually have a video that will show you how this works. So this is my yard again. So Oliver and his family have already been trapped, spayed, neutered, and whatnot. So I don't want to get them. So that's where the drop trap is available. So my trap is, let me get this going. So my trap has this is a bucket on the back with water. And that's the weight that keeps it to keep the trap from moving around. So this string goes up into the kitchen where I'm waiting anxiously. Yeah. So yeah, I just tightened up the string and waiting. Now I'm waiting for the tail to be fully under the trap. And so that's some of my feline codependency probably coming out there, that just wanting to make sure that there's not going to be any way of hurting this cat. Vicky would have pulled the trigger a long time ago on this.
Not Phil, though. His heart's just pounding right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when the cat gets enough food, it's going to readjust, and the tail will go in, and then I'll pull the trigger, and you'll see that. One thing to consider with the drop trap is you want the ground has to be completely level. There can't be any kind of divots in the ground or something, otherwise the cat will escape through that. Here we go. So he's darting around. Now I'm running outside now with a blanket to cover the drop trap. Ideally, the blanket you use is going to be bigger than the blanket that I used. Ideally, the trap is fully covered. And then you're going to see how you transfer a cat from the drop trap into a regular trap, which is pretty straightforward. So that's where you needed the weight. Can you see how he's trying to dart around? If the trap didn't have a weight, you would easily be able to dart up and get underneath it.
That should actually be completely covered.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few things in this that I don't do right. That's one. The other one's about to come up. So when you're transferring a cat from the drop trap to the trap, ideally you put your foot on the trap that the cat's going into, not the drop trap. So opposite of what I just did. But the blanket over the trap makes it look like a tunnel for the cat. So they think they're going to dart out through there and escape, but they're going to go right into the trap. And just like you did, it's actually amazing how often they just go right in.
What might happen, since he didn't have his foot, is the cat could hit the back of that trap, move it enough to turn around and race out of it before he could ever get it shut.
Yeah, if that had been pavement or asphalt or something, that's what would have happened. It would have darted out and it would have probably lost the cat. So drop traps are super handy. I use them quite a bit. So we're going to do the presentation of, again, how to use the traps and stuff. We'll do that at the end. So when you're trapping, when you get down to trapping, there's lots of parts to it. So one thing is to make sure the traps are lined with something. Some people use newspaper. Some people use pillowcases or cardboard. But basically something so that it's more comfortable in their paws when it's the cold. You want to make it inviting, kind of. So. Then people for the bait food, you'll see on the trap itself, there's a little trip plate and kind of towards the back of the trap, about 3/4 of the way in. Then there's a little space in the back, and that's where you put the food, is on the back behind the trip plate. I just dab a bunch of food onto the newspaper now. I used to use paper plates, so a little piece of plate or something, but now I just dab it on there. The cats don't seem to care. And then dribble little bits of wet food or little crumbs of wet food basically in the trap that kind of lead up to the bait. So some cats, if they're really skittish and you don't get to acclimate especially, then you could do things like sprinkle catnip or something, or little other bits of food around the traps, just kind of pulling them in toward them and helping them find the traps in a sense, especially if they're not acclimated.
You don't want to use a can of cat food because the trip plate will come down on the can and not shut the door all the way.
Yep.
That trip plate, when he steps on it to try to get the food behind, when he does that, that's what drops the door. So if you have something that gets stuck under there, that's why we'll use like half of a paper plate or a piece of foil or just on the newspaper, but back far. Some cats get real trap smart and they'll like reach their necks or to get it, but for that we have different traps that have different, where the trip plate is.
Yep. So. When we're setting the traps, you always want to make sure it's level ground. And that's mainly these traps are closed by gravity. And so if they get in there and it's rocking and rolling, then the door's going to close. And so you want to make sure that it's fully level. You also want to make sure that there's nothing going to obstruct the door because it is.
Say that over again because you said the door would automatically close.
It will. The door will automatically close. Open. No, the door will close if it's rocking and rolling and the cat's in there and it's not on stable ground.
Sorry.
So, but also the obstruction, so that if the door is obstructed, because it's gravity, it could be simple as weeds and grass. Like it doesn't have to, that's enough to keep the door from fully closing. And so when you set the trap, you always want to make sure and kind of actuate the door to make sure it's going to open and close fully, and there's nothing in the way. You may need to pull grass or weeds out of the way. I made the mistake once of not really paying attention, and there was roots in the way, and cat went in there and ate and feasted and then left, and I didn't have a cat. So that's one of those things, again, usually you learn the hard way on those kind of things, and then like, oh yeah, now I remember to do that. Especially when you're starting out, never leave the traps unattended. Always be watching from some distance, whether it be in your car, or, you have to get far enough away so the cats will come and do their thing, but don't just leave the traps out and come back a long time later and check them out. You always want to be keeping an eye on to see what's going on. Once the trap is sprung, you want to make sure, basically whenever there's a cat in the trap, it always needs to be covered, pretty much all the time. So when they're uncovered in the trap, that's when the cat's going to be super stressed. If it's covered up and it's darker, then they're going to be much more calm. And so always keep it covered. So I'll say that a lot because that's a pretty important piece. Cats may panic when they get in the trap and kind of thrash around. Some do, some don't. So it's, if it does, don't freak out. And again, for me, that was a stressful thing because sometimes they'll get their nose bloodied a little bit as they're kind of smashing their face against the side of the metal trap trying to get out. And so, but they'll calm down a bit, generally pretty quick, and just let them be. Some people want to reach their fingers in and pet them, and all, like, don't do that. Don't just let them be.
Super important to completely cover that trap. If there's a sliver of light in a corner, that cat's going to be hitting at that. If there's no corner showing light, he's going to relax and stop moving until you go to pick him up. And then some cats will go back and forth, and back and forth. They're hard to carry. So then I just kind of hold on top and hold it kind of against you so that you can carry it flat. Or let them sit at one end and they'll hold on that way. And then you can just kind of carry it sideways if that's the way they prefer.
You may sometimes get something that you didn't anticipate getting.
Ugly kitty.
In my trapping, I've only gotten possums. I've never had the luxury of other animals, besides cats, of course. But it's not too uncommon to get possums or raccoons, yeah. So with possums, they seem to like it in there. They like the traps, and they don't want to leave. So sometimes it takes a little bit of effort to get them out of the traps. I've generally, they're not the super scariest of animals. I mean, they look ferocious, but they're not. I'll open the thing and just kind of let it, kind of coax it out. I mean, you pick up the trap and kind of help it along a little bit. I think Vicki, you will.
They're very hissy. Another thing I like to mention here is that if you ever see the babies or anything, don't feed possums milk. They can't break it down. It can kill them. So don't give them milk, which would be a lot of people's natural thing to do with the little babies. But you don't want to do that. What you were going to say is, yeah, you don't want to do that. They're just kind of slow animals. So I just open the door and leave it for like an hour, and hopefully when I come back, they've gotten out of it. But they could have it, you could open the door right in front of them, and they don't have a lot going on, I don't think. They just don't leave.
One thing to consider with wildlife when you're letting them go, I mean, it's kind of like with the cats too, you want to point them in the direction that you want them to go. So be mindful of that. If they're, just bring them over to a treed area or something and open it up there. So they're going to be running, basically usually like a raccoon is going to run right out and just disappear somewhere. So don't aim it towards the road or something.
Raccoons normally, when they're afraid, they run up things. So don't let it be you, because there is a chance that the raccoon could come out upside down and just leap towards you. Whenever I've let a raccoon out, I always grab a garbage can lid, and I always have one in my hand, just in case they come up. But every time I've ever pointed them, like once through a gate, under a fence, towards the woods, they've always gone straight out, and they're running. So I've never had a real problem with it, but I take advantage of the fact that I know that they go up from a wild animal class that I took, so I have something to protect myself. And they can be very upset. So the other thing you want to do, oftentimes they will have already taken your whatever you have covered and pulled it inside or torn it. So I will take a blanket or something to throw over the top so they can't see your hand coming in to pick up the trap to move it wherever. If the police get involved or animal control, they'll take your trap and be gone for a while. And you don't know where the raccoon's getting let out, which I hate because then I started thinking, well, did it have babies and all that? So the things to remember with raccoons, they're really rowdy in there. They're jumping all over, hide so they can't see your hands. Get something for your face, point them in the direction you want them to go, and then you can pull the trap up or tip the brown ones over because they will automatically open, and then you should be fine. I've never had a problem with one, but I don't particularly like catching them either.
And for some people, that could be really scary. So that might be an opportunity to call your mentor too, if you really don't know what to do and or really want some help in that space, is to call your mentor there. There's something else I was going to say about that. What was it? Is there other wildlife besides raccoons and possums?
Well, I caught a squirrel. He wasn't very happy. Not that I can think of.
Okay.
If I think of it, I'll let you know.
So you've got your cats, you've trapped them. Now comes the time between trapping and your appointment, basically the clinic, so before surgery. So again, leave the cats covered in the traps. Don't try to touch the cats. And you want to have a warm, kind of dry, quiet holding space for the cats, both before surgery and after surgery. And so that could be your garage or a shed or something. Some people use their bathrooms. What you don't want is like your living room with your toddlers or other cats running around or something. Like you want to be thinking, these cats are already stressed, so you don't need to add more stress to them, or you don't want to stress out your indoor cats as well. So if you have a quiet space somewhere, heated is nice, or somehow not crazy cold, especially for the post-surgery time, so that the cats can be not have extra stress of temperature to contend with. But you also want to put down, if it's a garage or something, you want to put down some kind of material, tarp or something with newspapers on top, so that if they do let their bladders go, then it's not into your concrete or into your carpet or something. So
I personally keep them off the concrete if you can, because that's the part of their body that's actually touching. So the bottom is going to be the most important. And I get cardboard that's very thick, real thick, and I put that down. And then I put plastic on top of that, and then I put towels on top of that. So it catches the urine, I can move the towels, and then yet they stay warm. Mm-hmm. That's what I recommend. Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily want them in your house if you can find a better spot, because that male cat urine really has a strong, pungent smell, and even for a couple of weeks after they get neutered. So that's sometimes a lot of times people don't want that in their house.
Mm-hmm. And this may be one of those things that we talk about in the coalition, that you don't have to do it all. Maybe you ask for help, and maybe there's somebody else that has a space. You don't have a good quality space that you feel that you have for holding the cats before and after surgery, and so maybe somebody else does. Somebody else in here, or somebody else that you find in the CCC that has, a shed or garage or whatever that would work for that. And so that's where a lot of this, to really make this go well and successful and less stressful, is working together, and even breaking this down into the smaller parts and having somebody else be able to do that. If you live in an apartment or something, you may not have space for this, but there are other people who do. And so finding those people. You want to withhold food. So the day before surgery, the night before surgery, is when you want to withhold food from the adult cat. So before you go to bed that night, pull the food out of the trap. That's when you use the divider fork again to separate out and then pull the food out. And that way, why do they do that? So they don't
vomit.
They don't vomit during surgery and complicate things. So, and then the kittens, though, are the exception. Kittens can have food, wet food, the morning of surgery.
They have a tendency their blood sugar will drop, those kittens. So they do let us feed them just a little dollop before surgery. So first thing in the morning when you get up is okay. And then they're going to feed them as soon as they're back on their feet. They'll give them another dollop of food because they're trying to keep their blood sugar up. You don't have to worry about that with the adults. Water is fine for anybody.
Although usually with the water, what we often do is mix it in with the food, with the wet food, to make it a little bit more moist. Because if you put a water bowl in there with a feral cat, it's going to mostly spill it and make a big mess everywhere. So most of us mix in the water. Is that what you do? Mix in the water?
I don't actually.
Oh.
I give them, brings up our other really good point, is that there's 30 ways to come to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
And you will hear everybody give you their opinion of which way is right. But all of them are right. Really, I mean, it's what's going to work in the long run for you. What Phil and I are trying to do is give you the basics where you can't go wrong, pretty much. And then as you start doing this, you'll find things that work good for you.
Yeah.
And what works good for him might not work as well for me. You know, everybody's situation is a little bit different, or
Yep.
just what they prefer. So,
Yep.
no problem.
Yep. The changing the bedding. So before you bring the cat to the clinic appreciates when you change the bedding before the cat gets there. So basically that morning of, take out the bedding of the trap and add fresh bedding. So change out the towel or whatever's in there for the trap. Again, that's a nice use of the divider fork in an enclosed space for that.
I was back on, do you really use linens?
Of course. When I was saying earlier about the trap, you want to decorate it, make it even all pretty. And
I pictured that.
yeah, you don't do that. So this is Oliver's offspring in my basement waiting their day at the clinic. So they don't know what's about to hit them, but. Transporting. So now you're basically at that step of saying, okay, going from the holding area to the clinic. Depending on how many cats you have is obviously going to complicate some of that. But one thing that you do definitely want to do is put some kind of tarp down in your car, some trash bags or something that's going to keep if they do let their bladders go so the urine doesn't go into your carpet. You don't want that happening. So that's really an important piece, is to have something down that's plastic and then an absorbent. Some people use towels, some people use newspapers. And so but then you can stack traps. So if you're doing an SUV or something and you've got bigger space that's kind of height-wise, you can put traps down in a bottom layer. You want to make sure there's an absorbent thing between the layers of cats, again, so that towels or something in the middle. And you want to bungee down those top traps, either bungee them down to the bottom traps or somehow so they're not going to rock and roll while you're driving. What you don't want is take a turn too fast and the trap rolls over and the door opens up, because that's the way these traps work. And suddenly you've got a feral cat running around your car. You don't want to do that. So always make sure they're bungeed down, so they're not, especially the top layer, so they're not going to move around. Never transport cats in an open bed of a truck. That's a pretty big piece, especially after post-surgery, because the stress of that can easily kill the cat after the anesthetic. So we're pretty picky on that in terms of the traps that we loan out. That's not something that doesn't happen. Obviously, if you have a large number of cats, you may need more vehicles to arrange to figure that out, how to get them all to the clinic at the same time. And that's where, again, working together, maybe somebody has a bigger, I think I can get 6 or 7 traps in my car, but you can figure out how many you can get in your car and make it go from there. One thing I want to point out is these carabiner clips. These are super helpful in securing the traps. So I keep mentioning that these are gravity doors on these traps. So when the rings basically fall down, then the door is closed. But if the rings if the trap rolls over, those rings are going to fall down again, and now the door flops open. And so, which is great if you're getting rid of wildlife or something out of the trap. But if you have your cat in it and it flips upside down, then suddenly you've lost your cat. So easy way around that is basically just use a clip to clip the door closed, and it doesn't matter what happens, which orientation the way the trap is, it's not going to open up. So then the back side of the trap, and these traps have doors on both sides, and the back side you can put a clip on that door as well, just for protection. So it's cheap insurance.
Which is a good segue into always check to make sure the trap or the carrier is closed when you're moving them around your house, when you're moving them into the car, when you're moving them from the car to the clinic, and especially when you pick them up from the clinic. Make sure those things are shut before you walk out into the parking lot. They've lost a lot of cats that way. Mm-hmm. Now the cats are relocated and anesthetized, just waking up, and loose. And we don't always find them. So it's really important, because that'd make you really feel bad.
Yeah, ideally you're not rushing in this stuff, because that's when you make mistakes, is when you don't double check the door or something like that, and that's when you find out the hard way.
It's just an important step you want to remember.
Yep. So here you can see the traps are stacked in the back of this SUV. The top ones are bungeed down to the bottom ones, and there's lots of towels between them as well. So that's what it can look like when you're transporting. Often when you're transporting too, ferals in traps will generally be super quiet. You'll never even hear that they're there. They're just hunkered down and kind of scared and waiting for everything to go away. So they're super quiet. Now, if you do have a cat in a trap and it's talking up a storm, there's probably a good chance that that's actually a formerly pet, basically somebody's pet, either former abandoned or lost or something. That it's because the friendly cats seem to be the ones that talk more in that. So something just to notice in that. Doesn't mean it's not a guarantee, but It's something that happens. So each clinic has a different protocol. It's best to get familiar with the clinic and how it works, and that's where talking to the mentor, somebody who's familiar with that particular clinic, will help you in that. 'Cause each one does things a little bit different, but you want to familiarize yourself with their policy, with their procedures. A lot of them you can get the paperwork in advance and fill that out. There's a surgical release form that will happen. It'll cover all of your cats, and there's a medical form for each cat that'll need to be filled out as well. And I think with feral cat, when you do the reservation online, you can actually print out the medical form from there with all the information you've already entered. So feral cat spay neuter clinic has online, when you make the reservation, you can actually get those forms and print them off, and it makes things super easy, super helpful. One thing to be aware of is when you're bringing cats to the clinics, only one cat per carrier or per trap. Certainly no cardboard boxes or soft-sided carriers. So that really comes in when there's kittens. Like each kitten has to have its own trap or its own carrier, not all together. You also want to bring a fresh towel, fresh bedding for each cat in a trap. So basically, usually for that, we just take a fresh towel and put it in a plastic bag, like a grocery bag, and tie it to the trap. And that way so what they'll do is after surgery, they'll change the bedding in the trap. So the cat post-surgery goes on fresh bedding. And then they'll give you back the old bedding in that bag. So you generally get back. Don't use your best towels though, because you may not get exactly back. The towel that you gave them may not be the towel you get back. Always keep this.
It's a great towel swap.
It is. I've gotten some awesome towels that way. It's amazing. Always keep them covered. Again, keep saying that. So this is a recovery. This is actually a project in Everett that I helped out on, and we were doing recovery in their basement of this house. And so we put down the tarp, you can see, and then all the newspapers, and then all the traps are all fully covered. This was a heated space already, so that was handy. And then they wait till they're released. So post-op is similar to pre-op in the holding part. This is where the warmth part comes more into importance, that after the anesthetic, it's really important that the cats be in a warm space. And so there's lots of ways of doing that if you don't have heat. Vicki has an ingenious way, I think, of doing that. Can you say that?
One thing I would say about this is that when you're bringing them in, they also need to be warm, because if you're going into surgery, they need to be as healthy as possible. So having their body temperature not low is important. They will ask you to leave your cats in the car. Don't bring them and line them up outside the clinic. And the reason for that is the body temperature needs to be up. You don't want it dropping. Same thing afterwards, the body temperature does drop during surgery. So one way of helping them to recover quicker is by keeping them warm afterwards. In the clinic, they'll turning them, because that'll also help them wake up. So they're doing that. And they're in a little confined space and they're in a warm room. But once you get them home, you have to make sure that that's also warm. And so what you're going to want to do, what I do, is you can take like the big 2-liter pop bottles and fill them up with hot water. And I use traps, so the cats might be 3, right? And I would put these bottles in between and then put a sheet over it all, so it makes kind of a tent and helps to keep warm. Obviously, I have it very warm on the bottom as far as all the stuff that I said I put down. And then I just kind of keep an eye on them. I keep peeking in at them, make sure that they're waking up and they're moving around in there. The other thing with post-op is if you're trapping for others, you have to really convince people not to let them out of the carrier when they get them home. And the reason is their depth perception is not good on the day of surgery. They might think they're jumping a foot, but they're jumping a lot further than that, and they can get hurt. And so by keeping them in their carrier or their trap overnight, they're a lot safer. And they also, then you can monitor them better. You can manipulate the heat so that they get warmer. It's just a lot better way to do that.
In my space, kind of similar, I'll have boards down on the floor so the traps aren't sitting right on the floor. Lots of blankets and towels. I actually have electric heating pads that are kind of outdoor heating pads that are safe for cats and as a heat source. So quiet is the other one, just to make sure it's not a loud space. Before you put food, you start giving food to the cat again. Once you picked it up from the clinic, you want to make sure it's fully awake. The cats take a while to fully wake up. And so what you don't want is to put food in there too soon. The cat's not fully awake and it kind of plops its head down or passes out in the food and suffocates in the food. So always just be really careful that make sure it's fully awake. And if you're not sure, just wait. The cat will be okay waiting an extra hour or two to eat. So just be sure it's fully awake. And again, I mentioned the water. That's why I mix water in with the food at that point again. So it's just more, they can get the water that way. You can always keep them covered. So when you go in the release, there's a lot of things to consider. You can see in this picture, like you want to, like I mentioned before at the wildlife, point the cat in the direction you want it to go. And this guy, usually they just dart out and disappear. This guy had to turn back and give me the evil eye first, but usually they just go. So things to consider when you're releasing. And when it's a bigger project, like some of the ones I keep talking about, it's really important to remember where that particular cat was trapped, because it needs to go back to where it was trapped and be released there. And so lots of black cats look the same. So that's where some kind of numbering system or some kind of, I think on that big project, I actually wrote out a map and kind of just kept track that way and had a numbering system for each cat. So I could know for sure this black cat went over here and bringing it back over here. You don't want to release them to where they don't belong. So depending on when you release the cat, kind of from a time frame, depends on what was done to the cat in terms of spay neuter, simple spay neuter versus something more complex. These are numbers that are kind of general numbers, and this is where people are going to have different opinions, different thoughts on this, and as you go, you'll develop your own. You'll figure out what's going to work for you in that. Some of that's kind of juggling your own stress level versus the stress level of the cat. But these are the general time frames for routine spay, 48 to 72 hours. So this is the time that you're keeping the cat from post-surgery to when you actually release the cat. And the routine neuter is 24 to 48 hours. Complicated spay or neuter. The vet generally will, on the medical release form, may give you some more information about some of that if there was some kind of complication. And you can talk to the clinic and get their feedback about what they would recommend then based on that, whatever was done to the cat, of when it might be released. But other things to consider is the weather, timing of the release, kind of holidays, just stuff that's going on in the neighborhood, that kind of thing about when you might release. You don't want to, you want a quiet time. You want to make it as easy on the cat as possible in that regard. But is there more you want to talk about with the times?
As far as releasing?
The release times, yeah.
For releasing, the only things I would add is it's so important to do it at the right time. I will always look at the weather and see what's coming. If there's a day that's going to be clear, but there's 2 days going to be raining, I might let the cat go a day early or hold them an extra 2 days, depending on the weather, whether it's a male or female. Like if it's going to be really terrible out or snowing, I would probably hold on to that cat a couple extra days. But then you have to watch certain things. If the cat's not eating for 3 days because it's so stressed, it's going to be better to let that cat go, even though it's going to be raining. So those are good questions to ask, like your mentor, when you're first doing this. Eventually, you start making these decisions on your own, but there is a lot to be said for really thinking it over, because it's a lot of common sense stuff. Sunday mornings, really early in the morning, it's going to be a nice day. That's a perfect. The traffic is low. There's not kids out. There, it's quiet. You set the animal down in their usual spot. I usually half uncover it so that they have 5 minutes to look around and realize everything sounds like home, everything looks like home. Then I'll walk over and I'll put food where food belongs and walk out of their picture so they know it's there, and then I'll release them. And I usually am going, don't run, no running, as they fly out of there. But they'll usually come back within an hour or two to eat that food. So I think doing it that way is a good way to do it when you're first starting. But I've seen it not work well when I've released a cat that ran for blocks and out into the highway, off the highway, and down into a ditch. That was just heartbreaking. It makes it really hard because sometimes you don't know what they're going to do. He was actually trying to follow another cat. And so you do the very best that you can with the situation and think ahead. That's
What about if there's kittens out there?
Well,
and you're holding on to the mom and...
Oftentimes what we have done as a group is we'll call up and say, hey, can somebody come help with this release to try to find the kittens? So we'll all stand in different places and they'll let the mama cat go, and then we'll watch where she goes. And they're likely she's going to come towards one of us. that's standing there, and then we try to locate the kittens that way.
But is it
that
okay to
what you
hold
meant?
on? Was it okay to hold on to mom, and recover
Again,
mom for the?
that's a hard one because usually the vet can give you an idea if these are new kittens, like under a week, or whether they're older kittens based on the lactation that they see. And remember, one thing is that a female cat can still produce milk even though she's been spayed. She can still nurse those kittens. But the thing is how young are these kittens? If they're really young and they're in the woods versus under a trailer, that's worse. To be in the woods, unprotected. Under a trailer, a little more safe, less likely to have predators. If they're a little bit older, probably 2 days, for sure 2 days, they'd be fine. Would they be okay 3? Probably, maybe, but I wouldn't go any longer than that. Are they crying? People will ask them if they're hearing them, because I've had that happen under a trailer on day 3. They were really hollering, and we let her go that evening. So it can really vary. A lot of times we'll only hold them, one night if they're little kittens. Some people will even let them go the day of if they caught them like early. It's another reason why it's not a good idea to catch them early, because then you find out, oh, she just had kittens, because you didn't maybe know that cat. So it's not a good yes or no answer. It's again situational, and you just got to kind of think of everything.
Yeah, for me that was really stressful in that, trying to figure out make that choice, not wanting to make a bad choice in that. And that's where having my mentor was super helpful to reach out to and kind of get some support in terms of helping how to make those choices.
And you can join this group and the emails and ask questions like that, and everybody will give you their thoughts on it.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know that there's a group of 100 people willing to help with any question that you come up with.
And that's a big piece. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit. We use a Yahoo group to communicate within the CCC, and which is a great place to post either those kind of questions, or some people else will be kind of talking about that kind of stuff as well. And so it's a great way to learn from other people's experience about what they're doing and what they're considering when they're making these decisions as well.
Yep.
So once you've done all that, now you're kind of in the final stretch. And so now comes the follow-up, the cleanup. So if this is a colony that you're taking care of a lot, like for me, cats that come into out of my yard are subject to being spayed and neutered, and so I've lived there a long time, so a lot of cats come by and go, and so I keep track of everything. I actually use, LA Cat Allies has this feral cat tracking sheet that's online. It's really handy. That's what I use, but some people just keep other notes, but just keeping track of how many cats, what the characteristics of the cat was, when it got shots, all that kind of stuff, is pretty handy. If there was a colony caretaker, you want to fill them in on what all was done and how many cats and all that kind of stuff. The CCC, we have a database. It's actually a Google document online that we use to kind of track sites and projects and stuff, and we use that information for grant gathering as well. So that's a place that if you're trapping and as part of the CCC in this work, it's a great place to go and add that stuff, because we use that then later to know where the hotspots are for cats, and also just to be able to get grants. And you'll get information on kind of how to access that later. Once you're done with the trapping comes the cleaning and the sanitizing of the traps, being able to return them, laundry for all the towels and stuff that you use as well. And I think the CCC, we have towels available, trap covers available. I mean, pretty much everything you need is available to borrow for free. Yeah.
Sanitizing, just like bleach and water?
So the question is about sanitizing and how to do that. So bleach and water mix works. Vicki has an approach that's unique.
I'll take that with me to the car wash, and I clean them with those power washers. Be careful if you're doing carriers, because you hit that with the power washer, that carrier will go flying. But they're great on the traps, and I feel like they really clean them good. And then I'll scrub them down with the bleach diluted, and then rinse them off. I try to do that when there's not too many people around there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You have to make sure you rinse that bleach too really well.
I just wasn't sure if that was too strong, if you recommend something else.
No, bleach is probably the best thing, but is it 1 to 10?
I think that sounds right.
I think it's 1 part to 10 parts water.
Yeah. I've just mixed up a spray bottle, so I have it
Yeah, you
handy.
can do that.
Got a brush that I use, and it's kind of I basically have on the side some cleaning supplies that So it's really easy in that way. I don't go to the car wash. I just use the hose in the yard. These are the tracking sheets that I mentioned. So this is a little bit about Oliver again. So Oliver is, for me, is super friendly now. He's really affectionate, probably my most affectionate cat actually. But sadly, he still urine marks, even post-neuter. And so he still has to be outside or supervised inside. But he had 2 sons and a daughter. MK and Pierre were the 2 sons. Nora is the daughter, and this is Pierre here. And so this is, Nora is on the right, and MK is on the left. Nora remains super feral. She only comes around at night and has no contact with anybody. MK and Pierre have, as you can see, kind of tamed up more. Pierre actually have been able to touch him now, and when he feels really safe when Oliver's around, so I'm able to pet him. And there's something really rewarding about taming a feral and kind of winning their trust in that way. It's quite an amazing experience. But they'll get close enough to play as well, which is fun. But sadly, MK went missing back in January of 2015, so that's really sad. But he's gave him the best life that he could have for a feral cat. This is Pierre just recently playing on the back porch. Again, Pierre. And that's my Oliver now. He's, again, super friendly. We'd never known from the first day when he was so skittish and would not share the yard at all, but over time we've learned to trust each other. So a few thoughts about when you're starting out. I would suggest that you go along with somebody kind of work along on their project. I went along with Vicki on some of her early projects and with Nancy and with some others, and just to get a sense of how it all works and what all to consider when you're assessing sites and making those decisions. Certainly your backyard, your own cats is a great place to start as well. Sometimes some people in the CCC will organize a cooperative trapping, so a larger project and involve more people and ask for volunteers, and that's where maybe you only have a little bit of time and you can just do a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And so it's a great way to get experience as well in kind of doing a part or pieces of a bigger project. One person can make a huge difference, and it doesn't matter how you contribute. Some people, there's so many ways that are helpful. Some people just do the laundry, just washing the towels. That's so helpful. Other people will help trap. Other people will have a place to hold the cats. Some people will, we have volunteers that'll do fundraising and educational outreach. And so some will man some of those booths at different festivals and do education. And how else do people help out? There's different, fostering is a big one. Sometimes there'll be kittens that are rescued and they'll need a foster or some socialization so they can be adopted out.
Bottle babies.
There's just a ton of different ways to help. So that's I think is one of the amazing things.
Making things to sell.
Yeah.
Some
so we'll have
make
these
those little kick things with catnip.
Yeah. Or little blankets and stuff that we have available for donation at different events, and people that sew those. And so there's just so many ways of helping out, and everything makes a difference. And it's amazing to see how that all comes together to really make a difference in the lives of all these community cats.
Feeding a colony, another.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about the CCC and what we offer. Classes is one. So this is the basic TNR class that we try to do about monthly or so. Everything's volunteer. So all these classes are taught by volunteers, and some of it's based on need. Some people will say, hey, there's a need for this. And barn relocation is a class that gets taught here and there based on need. Kitten taming, bottle babies. There's been rescue medicine. There's been drop trap kind of making classes.
Then we do fun activities too, to make sure that we keep doing things that are fun. You don't let it all get to you. Like felt. Ever made felt animals? What else, Nancy?
Yeah.
Covered
Okay.
it?
Yeah, and that's the social stuff. And for me, one of the things that was important for me in this is wanting the community, wanting to be a part and helping other people that have similar interests. And so there's all sorts of social activities that happen as well. And some of that gets posted on the Yahoo site. We can learn about that stuff. It's certainly not required. So things, mentoring, I've told you about that. Adoption events. And so The CCC itself doesn't have any cats because it's an organization that helps independent people or organizations that do have cats. But the CCC will organize adoption events for independent rescuers who have cats that are looking for homes. And so this is huge because in the past you rescue cats, you're trying to find homes for them, and that's often really difficult. So the CCC will organize these like right now there's a Home for the Holidays event going on. I think it happens around Christmas time, and they get a storefront donated to them, or then they basically get a month of being able to have weekends of cat adoption. So lots of different cages, and you get to bring your cats there and kind of showcase them and help them find homes. And for an independent rescue, I know for me, I've kind of participated in that and found a few homes for different cats for that, and it's so helpful to have that as a resource.
Not only that, it's also a good thing if you're still socializing some kittens to take them there and have them spend the day there with people interacting. It's really a good thing for those kittens. And then maybe towards the end, they actually get homes.
Yep.
There's also a lot of raffles and things like that. Sometimes we'll share that space with other rescues, not necessarily cat rescues even. And like I think at Home for the Holidays, there's another group that does wreaths and, is that the horse rescue or?
I think it's a bunch of different animals, horses and
Lots of
other
different
things. Yeah.
animals, different species rescue.
Yep.
So it's fun, and it's fun to get to know all those people, too.
Yep. And some people just volunteer at those kind of events, go around and talk to potential adopters or just talk about the cats or empty litter boxes or whatever. There's just so many different ways. CCC offers, we have food barrels in different stores, pet food stores. Feral barrels, they're called, that in grocery stores where the general community can donate food to help for the community cats as well. And I love that because these are community cats. They belong to the community. And so some people may not want to do the trapping or whatever, but they want to just provide food and donate food so that the cats are being cared for that way. And so what that means, though, is that there's food available that gets donated that's available then for those that feed colonies of feral cats. And so we generally do like a quarterly distribution of this food based on how much is donated and divvied up amongst those that are feeding ferals. And so that's another benefit that happens that you can, again, since you've taken this class, you're able to kind of take advantage of some of these benefits. Obviously, whatever gets donated dictates how much there is available. I mentioned that there's traps available for loan. There's the cameras. There's basically everything you need that we've talked about already is available for loan at no cost. I do want to point out that the CC traps are only to be used for TNR. They're not for relocation of any wild animals or relocation of any cats, unless it's an official barn relocation. But it's not. Some people will get traps and get a raccoon and want to bring it to the neighbor's yard or bring it to somewhere else. Like we're not going to be part of that.
Some people think that you can just take a cat and move it to a new place. There's an actual plan you have to make. It's a relocation. It takes weeks to be able to do that. You don't just drop a cat in some place it's never been with a group of cats that it now doesn't know its own pecking order and gets shoved out, not allowed to eat from the other cats. You have to integrate them. So there is a whole process.
There's a process for that, for sure. We're kind of big on to not use our traps to bring cats to shelters in particular, because often the shelters don't have the resources for handling feral cats. And so what that means is cats that come to shelters and traps are often euthanized. And it's not a dig at the shelters. They only have so much resources, and that's not one generally they have don't have that for that. So we're really big on, if you're using our traps, it's not for bringing cats to shelters, and we have a trap loan agreement that we have people sign. That's one of the stipulations of that. And so, because there's trap neuter return. We're about returning the cats to where they go, not about exterminating the cats. And sometimes when you're going out collecting data or talking with people that want traps or want cats to be trapped, they'll insist that we don't want these cats back here. You can trap them or do whatever, but get them out of here. And that's where we do the educational piece again that says that's not going to be helpful. If there's a food source already, other cats will be drawn to that same place. Kind of give them all sorts of education around understanding how feral cat colonies work, and that just by getting rid of cats, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be new cats are going to move right back in. And so, and we can help them understand what's going on, why the cat's a nuisance, and maybe there's things that we can do to help the cats be less of a nuisance, and so that they can be a part of the community and be accepted in that way. Other things that can be helpful that we offer, so maybe you trap a cat and you want to, it's a friendly cat and you looked around for a home for it and nobody's claimed it, and so now you want to find it a new home. So there's vouchers that are available that'll cover the cost of spay neuter, that'll cover the cost of vaccines. Maybe it's the cat, you need to do a viral test on that cat for FIV, ELV. There's a combo test that's available for the CCC. And these are all things in the past that independent rescues were doing anyway and paying out of pocket for. And so now the CCC can help through their fundraising efforts to help reimburse or cover some of these costs, which is huge. There's one of the rescues that works with us that donates or has low-cost microchips that are available, basically at cost for the microchip itself, which is like $4 or $5, which is super awesome. So there's also limited assistance with vet bills. So if there's a cat that's injured or something, there's a process that you can go through, and that requires some board approval before that's going to happen, but that can be helpful. And then various medical supplies for kind of routine stuff may be available as well. So these are communications. So how we communicate within the CCC is a lot of email, mostly email. There's the Yahoo group that I mentioned, which is a way of basically kind of a closed group communication using email to communicate. So after this class, sometime you're going to get an email from me if you've signed up with your email. That's going to give you information for accessing this stuff, basically. And so one is a document called What's Available to CCC Members, which has some of the information I just told you, but even more specifically of how to access those things. What we have is a lot of different email addresses that, based on what it is that you're looking for, you can look on the document to see what email address you need to be able to reach out to say, hey, I need some food, or I need some help with this or whatever, and somebody will get back to you on that. So you're going to get that email later. You also get an email invitation to the Yahoo group as well, which will be separate. If you've never used the Yahoo group before, I would suggest that it can be a bit overwhelming at times, lots of emails coming in. And so you may want to set up a different email account just for CCC stuff, or you can select, when you're setting it up, the option to get a daily digest, it's called, which will basically give you one email that kind of puts all the emails into one email for the day. So you just get one email from them rather than, some days it's, 10 or 20. Some days it's none. So it kind of varies, but that way you don't get overwhelmed by it all. Questions?
Can you explain little Oliver?
Oh, so this is the real Oliver, and then Lori, one of our CCC members, knitted a little Oliver to go with him. So that's, yeah, I'm a little fond of Oliver, for sure. Yeah. But other questions? Yeah.
Are there any laws at all where the cat has to be microchipped before you can own them? Is that something that they're working on so that people become more responsible for their animals?
Okay, so the question is there any kind of laws that require cats to be microchipped before you can own them? I'm not aware of any such laws. Are you?
No, there are none.
Yeah.
Is it something that they might look into?
I can speak from a little experience. I've spoken with a Linwood animal control officer who's gone around to different apartments in that area and tried to talk to the managers about asking them to write those into their policies for rentals, is that they must be microchipped, because the police get called there as animal control, and yet they can't really do anything about it because it's not, a law, whereas he feels that if he could have it microchipped, then he knows who actually owns it, and he can press charges for it being left behind. And so far, the managers have not been willing to work with him. So it's kind of disappointing.
You bring up a good point, though, and you may want to look at the laws of the city or the town or wherever you are to see, because everyone's different, and they all have different ways of doing it. Some towns try to outlaw feeding of feral cats, like no feeding out cats. Others, in Linwood, I think there's if you're feeding cats, basically they say you own those cats, you're responsible for those cats. And so, okay, that's interesting. And Everett, it's legal to let your cat roam around. Like you can.
License in Linwood too.
You're supposed to license your cat.
Edmonds is a leash law.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
license, and it's like you buy a mini license or you buy a license.
It's a balloon.
And it registers them to that.
Yeah. So in Linwood, is that Linwood you said? So Linwood, you'd have to license your cats. in that. Supposed to, yeah. So that's something to look into, though, is, you know, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, see what are the laws or that are affecting you as you do it. So yeah.
Well, like on Mercer Island, they don't allow you to trap. That the police told me that, and I'm like, well, but animal control won't come out and do it. What do you do? And so she just kind of said,
So the
you know,
question,
basically, don't ask, don't tell. You know.
Yep. Yep.
the question is, Mercer Island does not allow you to trap. The same is true of all of King County.
Really? Okay.
But everyone does it.
Yeah.
And
They
so-
kind of turn a blind eye to it unless it's a problem.
Definitely
Yeah.
enforce it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a use your discretion, and
Ask questions later.
yeah.
Well, I had just trapped a cat, and I didn't know who it belonged to, and I knew the police had a microchip, and it was a Sunday at night. They had a reader, so I said, can I borrow the reader? And they said, sure. And she said, don't announce that you caught this cat in a trap. Just say you saw this cat and you're using the microchip, because you're not supposed to trap.
Perfect.
That brings up the microchip scanner piece. That the CCC actually has some of those around the areas. Different. I think there's one in Bothell, one in Everett. People that a part of the CCC have these for that purpose. So if you do get a cat in a trap, or a cat that you just want to get scanned, you know,
Vets are
you can.
closed.
Vets are closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can reach out to one of those people and borrow it for that purpose. Yep. Other questions?
Is there any suggestions you have as far as, we have another kid we're trying to catch that's injured, so he's really skittish, I can get close to him, but he can tell he doesn't want me to. I'm having a hard time catching him, but if I put food out for him, I'm feeding everything else, the possums, the raccoons, the squirrels, crows. So is there a suggestion you have for that as far as, I'd like to lure him back, because now he's been missing for a week and a half?
Do you want that one?
To reiterate the question was that you have a cat that's injured that you're having trouble trapping.
Right, but now I can't even come, I can't lure him back, and I put food out for him, and everything else eats it. So is there a suggestion on,
Do you still see the cat?
it's been a week and a half now.
I wonder if it's owned. How is this cat injured?
His rear leg, he can't use it, he keeps it tucked up, and his face is really badly, like, he was in a really bad fight. He had, one of his eyes, they were clear still, but he has like a pussy substance oozing from it, and he had some, you know, pretty big gashes on his face. So he's really dirty, he's super, super skinny.
This is probably one where you'd want to use a box trap.
It's hard though, because I work, I'm gone, I get home, it's light, it's dark, you can't see anything. So the only 3 times we've actually been able to get close to him was he was actually in the feral house that I built. And we went up to the feral house and he came shooting out of it. So now when we go up to the feral house, we put a box in front of the door. So if he comes out, he's gonna go right into that carrier.
Does he always hear you walk up to that?
No. Like,
You know, I have a net back there that I'd be willing to loan you,
okay.
and you put it over the hole, and he runs right into the net, and you just pull it.
That's what we would do with the carrier.
That's the only way I've actually been able to use my net is
Go that way.
is cats in there, because I'm just not a good natural netter, like some people are.
Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind is the
And I live in
coyote
Linwood
trap,
as well.
which is the coyote trap is a bigger trap, so it's like for a large coyote, so it's quite large, and that's a great tool for. It's like a regular trap, but it's just huge.
He doesn't go on the other ones at all. I've been catching possums.
What he's thinking, though, is putting that right up to that hole.
Yeah, and what are you using for bait?
Well, I can't even, we've tried everything. I've done tuna, I've done chicken, I did Kentucky Fried Chicken, I've done deli meat, we did catnip. What else have we done? We've done a lot.
Yeah.
Like, we bought probably 4 or 5 different kinds of wet cat food, because I know sometimes they get particular. I did get him to eat the tuna. When I threw it to him, he would eat it. The first time, we both scared each other, because I didn't know he was around, and I went to open the door to put more hay in it, and he came shooting out. I did get him to eat to kibble at that time.
Yeah.
And he ate the whole bowl. We watched from the kitchen. And this is before this is how I found you guys, was him. And I got all the perfect pals, and they sent me to Nancy and so forth. But I've tried everything, and now I haven't seen him for like a week and a half.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would think of is trying to just feed at one time, at a time when you're around or something, so that and just get him used to eating at a certain time every day, where that's where he has to show up and get the food if he wants to eat, and that way it's not food all the time, but
It's also possible that he has a secondary infection of an upper respiratory infection, and so he can't smell very good, and he's not attracted to the food, as well as feeling bad. I don't know because I can't see him, but with the goopy eyes, it makes me think that. Have you heard him sneezing or anything? Breathing with his mouth open? Will he put any weight at all down on the leg?
When he walked, he put it down a little bit, but it won't touch the ground and he hops. So he's not putting any pressure on that at all.
And that's been for days.
Yeah,
You don't even see him actually touch the ground with it. Does it just hang and swing?
he can move it. He'll pull
Okay,
it,
he
but
can move it.
he
All
doesn't
right.
extend it all the way down.
Well, why don't I send you with the net, and you can give me your information, and we'll see if that works for starters.
And we check the house a couple times a day to see if he's been in there sleeping, and I kind of rig it so I can tell if he's been in there or not. But I know we had a raccoon in it last week, and so I didn't know if that smell.
Yeah, you don't want to catch him.
You may want a trail camera too. I put the camera out there to collect information to see.
That's my other question too. I wonder if we should maybe try to set that up to see who's coming and
never.
going.
Yep.
So,
See who's there and what time he's coming around or that kind of
yeah.
thing.
We
Yep.
put food in the house, 'cause I thought, well, that way we stay dry, and I think that's probably what attracted the raccoon. And he made a big mess, and he pulled all the hay out, and so,
Do you use straw?
yeah, straw too. So it's improved.
Always use straw instead of hay.
Yeah, and we've got it, I mean, it's a nice warm place for him, and obviously he knows that, but like I said, he hasn't been back, like, he hasn't even been in the house last week and a half.
Well, he might be laid up, not feeling well. It could be he's abscessing somewhere too, and once that abscess breaks open, the fever will go down and he'll come back again.
Yeah, I've been checking the bushes, and we have like a little overgreen spot over by our house, I've been checking there for him too, to make sure he's not stuck someplace or hurt and can't get out. But I just wasn't sure about if there was another way I should maybe set up the food source for him, so that he can get to it, maybe just, deter the raccoons and all the possums and stuff.
I would just leave enough food.
Correct, okay.
Feed the world.
Feed the world. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I did try the other day to, and I've often heard this, to feed raccoons dog food, that they preferred it over the cat food, and we had like 6 raccoons eating at that stupid site that I showed you. And so I took dog food over there, and the cats ate at the dog food, and the raccoons ate the cat food. I was like, okay, so that doesn't
That
work.
didn't work. Let's try.
Now I know.
We have a fan of raccoons, and they're big, so I was worried about them also. I don't want them to hurt the cat.
Pretty soon they'll be in semi-hibernation. You won't see them so much. Not soon enough for your kitty, but we'll talk.
Okay, perfect.
Other questions?
Are there any cats you guys are trying in particular to catch?
Okay.
Who's Marie trying to catch?
Well, the cat in my yard has been coming for a year now.
Is it just one cat?
There are 3.
Does she only need to catch one, or does she have to catch all 3 for spaying and neutering?
Well, the cat, one of them has, all of them have already been, their ears have been clipped. And I think the others are just stray. Trying to catch that one. I don't know if it's feral or not.
So does she know if it's been fixed? Does the one she's trying to catch, does it have an ear tip?
Trying to catch it.
Ear tip? No.
Oh, no, ear.
Okay.
The others, yes.
Okay. What does she need to do that?
Bigger trap.
Big trap?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big cat.
Like one of the brown ones back there, she'll have to look at it.
I don't know. I have a regular trap, but I don't think they'll fit it.
Well, tell her that we do at
They've
this
already tried.
at the CCC, we have a coyote trap. Nancy, do you think that a cat stepping on that would set it off? Yeah.
Yep.
Does it? Does it? I've never used it, so I don't know. Oh, good idea, yeah. gets it halfway. So you'll be able to borrow that. All right, good. Anybody else have any situations that they need help or have questions on? No?
All right. Well, thank you for coming. And we'll have a little break here, and then for those that are interested and want to see the traps and how to work them, we can reconvene there in the back, and show you how to work them. Thank you.